the Pakistan has set a target of 4.2% growth with 10% increase in FBR taxes.
The revenue of FBR is expected to cross 14,100 billion rupees in 2025-26. The additional revenues that FBR has to collect next year are 2,400 billion, a very large amount. The position with respect to our large neighbor, India.
Exactly.
In terms
and Minister did mention the recent conflict between Pakistan and India. Exactly.
Yes. The fact that India has decided to withdraw from the Indus Water Treaty.
That is another threat.
The point is, Pakistan has to guard against this eventuality over the next few years of India diverting water. Our water resources projects must have the highest priority now.
How you see this rising trend of information technology exports, which is rising day by day? How you analyze some of the incentives made for the IT?
This year has taken us to a level of hardly $3 billion. India exports $220 billion of IT. The State Bank of Pakistan this year has let hardly any change take place in the exchange rate.
The last financial year, we missed the agriculture targets.
Agriculture. Do you know what was the decline in production by the major crops of Pakistan in the year which is about to come to an end?
True.
13.5%. Decline. One of the biggest declines ever in the history of our country.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Hello and welcome to Program Insight in V News English. Dear viewers, Pakistan's federal budget for 2025-2026 has been presented in Pakistani Parliament by Federal Finance Minister Senator M. Aurangzeb. And it is in the budget 2025-26, the Pakistan has set a target of 4.2% growth with 10% increase in FBR taxes. Number of incentives have been announced for agriculture sector, for various other sectors, aimed at giving boost to the economy. And this budget has been, most of the allocations have been included in the federal budget with the approval of the IMF. Government claims that this is one of the most balanced budget. To discuss today's federal budget, we are fortunate to have with us former finance advisor, Dr. Hafiz Pasha. Dr. Hafiz Pasha is a well-known name in Pakistani economy, and he has served as a finance advisor. In addition to this, he has extensively been writing on economic issues, have been appearing in different medias on economic and financial related issues. Dr. Hafiz Pasha Sahab, very warm welcome to Program Insight in V News English.
Thank you. Can I just add a little bit to my CV, if you don't mind? One, I have served as the Vice Chancellor of the University of Karachi.
Okay.
Almost 2 decades
viewers,
ago.
as Dr. Pasha Sahab said, he has also served as Vice Chancellor of Pakistan's premier and one of the oldest University of Karachi. And basically, yes, please go ahead.
And the other distinction I have is I'm the only Pakistani who has served as an Under Secretary General of the United Nations in New York for 7 years.
MashaAllah, that's a big profile. Under Secretary General of the United Nations in New York for 7 years. So we are fortunate to have with us. Very warm welcome. How you see, you must have definitely watched this speech of Finance Minister on TV channels and must have noted some of the key things. Government claims that it is one of the most balanced budget, keeping in view so many tough conditions from International Monetary Fund. Dr. Pasha Sahab.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Let me start by just clarifying one of your initial statements. You did mention that FBR revenues are anticipated to increase by 10%.
10%, exactly.
Yeah, now the actual position is very different. The revenue of FBR is expected to cross 14,100 billion rupees in 2025-26. So
Exactly.
that is the target, 14,100 odd billion. Okay? And
Yes.
this year, the expectation that we have is that it will conclude the year with revenues of 11,700 billion. So the additional revenues that FBR has to collect next year are 2,400 billion, a very large amount, and that will imply a growth rate of something like 21% in FBR revenues. So that is the target.
Exactly. That is the target.
Okay, now before I get into the other aspects of the budget, let me just also highlight to you the target has been agreed with the International Monetary Fund because we are currently operating on a 3-year extended finance facility with the United Nations, with the IMF, which is valued at a loan of $7 billion. Now, the issue is that the target growth rate for the GDP next year is 4.7%, 4.2% rather.
Exactly. 4.2%. Exactly.
Yeah, and the target for the inflation rate is 7.5%. So combine these two roughly add up to a cumulative increase in the tax base, the Pakistan GDP, by about 12%. 4.2 plus 7.5 roughly adds up to 12. So the normal growth in FBR revenues without any tax reforms in the budget, the increase would have been about 11%. This is based on serious research that we have done for many years. And at that basis, the increase in revenues would be hardly, if you like, 1,100 at best billion rupees. Now, with a target increase of 2,400 billion, it means that FBR's revenues will have to be augmented by improvements in tax administration and tax reform of 2,400 billion minus 1,100, almost 1,300 billion rupees. That tells you how tough a budget this is. It is seldom that Pakistan has been able to mop up through reforms as much as we like to think about 1,300 billion rupees. So it is a tough budget. Of course, the finance minister in his budget speech will never give the impression it's a tough budget for political reasons, understandably. And a series of measures have been proposed for taxation purposes. With all due respect, I've spent my life working on finances in Pakistan. My own assessment is that it is an inadequate budget. It does not generate enough either growth in the tax base or enough revenues from the tax base to meet the revenue targets. So we're beginning to start with a shortfall. Then the other issue is, what does it do? There are 2 or 3 immediate events of great importance. Please. The first is, unfortunately, the position with respect to our large neighbor, India.
Exactly.
In terms
and Minister did mention the recent conflict between Pakistan and India. Exactly.
Yes. So what were the implications of this on the budget? Number one implication, inevitably, is that Pakistan would have had to focus on an exceptionally large increase in the defense budget as a precaution against any further commencement
Eventuality, any
of
eventuality.
yes,
Exactly.
absolutely. However, under IMF pressure, the increase that has been targeted for is hardly 15%. And my own assessment is that there should be an emergency provision. Let's not make it explicitly defense related, but have an emergency provision of about 400 billion rupees to ensure that in the event it breaks out again, the conflict, then Pakistan can withdraw funds from the emergency provisions.
Exactly.
That has not been done. The other provisions.
Emergency allocations have not been made. To be clear, emergency allocations have not been made. This is what you are saying.
To the extent they should have, they have not been made. That's one very important consideration. The second consideration of importance is the fact that India has decided to withdraw from the Indus Water Treaty.
That is another threat, exactly.
And to me, this is such a fundamental problem that I would have thought that the finance minister would devote a few minutes to it. Instead, he only mentioned it in passing. The point is, Pakistan has to guard against this eventuality over the next few years of India diverting water. And therefore, our water resources projects must have the highest priority now.
Exactly.
It's interesting that in his priorities, he continues to enlist highways. Highways our politicians like because they are visible. But today, what Pakistan really needs is full investment in water resources. Now, what is the position today with regard to the water resources public sector development program? We have 34 projects in that program of the federal government, and the total cost of those for 34 projects is about 2,400 billion. And you'll be amazed, last year, which is just about to come to an end, we gave only 134 billion against a total cost of 2,200 billion. What should have happened this year in the announcement in this budget speech, he should have announced that top priority, number one priority to water resources, Damar Basha Dam, Moman Dam, so on and so forth. And forget highways for the time being. He didn't do that. And the end result is that insufficient allocation is being given to water. This is very unfortunate. The third area of priority, which I would have thought was very important, was that in Pakistan, poverty incidence, a few days ago, the World Bank has estimated.
Exactly. This is what I was going to ask you. 44% exactly is the poverty rate.
Now, sir, 45.
45.
And they emulated me because a few weeks ago I had said 45. Because based on my research.
44, 45 exactly, which 45. Is alarming.
Which means that over the last 7 to 8 years, we have had a massive increase. It used to be in the early 30s. So now it has gone up to 45, and today 12 crore, 120 million people almost are below the poverty line. This is one of the worst numbers, by far the worst number in Pakistan and one of the worst numbers globally.
For our viewer, quickly, one-liner, what is the definition of poverty? Those who earn less than $1?
No, it depends. We have follow an international poverty line, which is called PPP, Purchasing Power Parity Adjusted Poverty Line, and it is $3.6 per day, adjusted. In the case of Pakistan, this would in monetary terms be about $1.2 per day, per capita, per family. Okay?
Clear. Please continue.
So now the issue is, Has the government gone out of its way to tackle this problem? We have a very good, very efficient, very effective, very well targeted social protection program, and I salute that program of Benazir Income Support Program. Beautifully designed program, started about more than a decade ago, and it's a
Exactly.
very well executed program. He did not mention the percentage increase in the allocation given to the Benazir Income Support Program. He simply talked about the numbers who are being accessed. We should have gone for at least another 25 to 30% increase in the allocations, but I don't think that has happened. So these are some of my disappointments with the budget given the prevailing circumstances.
Dr. Pasha Saab, the two things have been mentioned as far as cash flow, expected cash flow. The finance minister said uh, 7 billion, right? The finance minister said that 17 billion, exactly 17 if I'm correct, will be through taxes, and 8 billion royalties expected from Recordec. These are the cash flows expecting, one from the increase that you have also confirmed in the tax, and the other Recordec. Question is, we are hoping so much from mineral sector. Do you think that in the days to come, in the next one financial year, we will be able to get that cash flow from Recordec and from other mineral resources? Government is eyeing high. 2 months back, there was also an international summit in Islamabad focusing on mineral sector attracting foreign investment. So, your analysis.
Well, let me first again clarify your statement. The numbers given by the finance minister basically relate to earnings over the next decade or so. And they are not in rupees, they are in dollars.
Dollars, exactly.
Recordec is expected to yield $17
Exactly,
billion,
expected.
and that we would see is what we are expecting. And the issue is delays in the implementation of mineral projects, and Recordec will not yield any dividend this year. We'll be fortunate if we can begin to see within the next 2 years effectively the generation of minerals and exports, so on. And we need to have the proper infrastructure. We need to have the proper transportation systems. All that has to be done because this is in a very inaccessible area otherwise in Balochistan. And so the end result is, my own expectation is, don't expect any significant earnings prior to 2027.
Before 2027, we may not expect anything.
Yeah.
So another important sector is, over last few months only, Pakistan has earned a significant amount by IT exports. So a number of incentives have been announced for IT exports, which is traditionally very, very good, other than the textiles, which used to be Pakistan's traditional exports. So how you see this rising trend of information technology exports, which is rising day by day? How you analyze some of the incentives made for the IT sector?
Well, Pakistan is one of the stragglers in IT. When I was the Undersecretary General of the United Nations, the Asia and Pacific was my territory for development.
True.
And I was instrumental in the first IT university or institute in India, in Bangalore. I helped India do it way back almost 24 years ago. I came to Pakistan and I spoke to the existing leadership at that time. And they said, we will do it, but they did nothing. They did not realize the importance of information technology. We are talking about an increase. An increase this year has taken us to a level of hardly $3 billion. India exports $220 billion of IT. That is the difference. And I can tell you, having been a professor in Pakistan for the last 40 years and having been both teaching in business school, economic school, mathematics, and so on, I can tell you one thing. My students are no less talented than the best students in America who I've also taught when I was doing my PhD. They have not had the support, they have not had the patronage, we have not invested enough in IT education, and this is the tragedy of Pakistan that we are one of the last entrants into this market, and we are at best getting to about $3 billion. It's a small amount. If Pakistan had entered at the time, for instance, people like me wanted in them to do so, Allah ke fazl se we should have been exporting about $30 billion.
A quick thing, Dr. Pasha Saab, is exports. A number of countries within the region we are witnessing. Bangladesh made significant increase in textile export. China, an extraordinary story. So why exports in Pakistan? Export targets have never been achieved. So what should be done to enhance export? Although industrial growth, as per Economic Survey of Pakistan, did not witness any reasonable progress in the outgoing financial year. So how we can make these exports more higher?
Fundamental question: Pakistan will not be able to move ahead, and Pakistan will not be able to gradually move away from a position of external vulnerability, which in other words is a default situation, unless and until Pakistan has rapid export growth. And for this to happen, we will have to do some very radical things.
For example?
I'm pleased to report to you that I had the great privilege, almost 24 years ago, of helping Bangladesh design its export incentive scheme when I was the Under Secretary General of the UN. And that scheme has worked beautifully. Now, do you know the details of that scheme? Okay, let me tell you.
Precisely.
Very, very simply, what we did, linked the effective exchange rate to the value added of a product. So a value added product like garments was given 20% above the official exchange rate, taka rate. And other exports got 10%, 5%, and so on. So it was a very well-designed scheme. I actually, to be very honest, had borrowed the scheme from the 60s in Pakistan, when Pakistan had a bonus voucher scheme, which was a brilliant scheme designed by Pakistan. And at that time, our exports really took off, and for the first time, we were able to export textiles. Pakistan, instead of incentivizing exports, has disincentivized them over the last year or two. Now, what have we done? First, we have decided to go in for almost a fixed exchange rate, manipulating the market skillfully. The State Bank of Pakistan this year has let hardly any change take place in the exchange rate. So the profitability of our exporters is being affected. Normally, you should at least have, in link to the rate of inflation, which in Pakistan is 5%, we should have had at least a 5% depreciation of the exchange rate, which did not happen. And secondly, to top it all, and to say, wah bhai wah, what we have done in the last budget is, 25 years ago, as the finance minister at that time, had introduced a scheme whereby exporters had to pay income tax of only 1% of their earnings. Do you know what they did last year in the budget? They withdrawn that 1% and made exporters subject to full tax liability. Khuda Hafiz, Khuda Hafiz, Khuda Hafiz.
Terrible. Lastly, I would like to seek your comment. One of the most important lifeline of Pakistan, as you mentioned, water, agriculture sector. And in the last financial year, we missed the agriculture targets. So, what are your hopes? Are you satisfied with some of the measures, including waiving off some of the taxes from fertilizers and things like that? Do you think it will help in giving boost to the agriculture sector, which is crying?
Let me again be honest and tell you that the budget is disappointing even in this area. And why is
Agriculture.
it disappointing? Agriculture. Do you know what was the decline in production by the major crops of Pakistan in the year which is about to come to an end?
True.
13.5% decline. Decline. One of the biggest declines ever in the history of our country. And cotton crop declined by 30%. And one of the reasons for this decline was the fact that unbelievably, the prices given to the farmers which they received declined by 21%. The price of wheat fell by 34%. And why did this happen? Because in line with the IMF, we withdrew a scheme which we had been managing for the last 30, 40 years called the procurement price and support price regime, which used to give farmers clearly the message as to what would be the price for the next crop. And that helped them in minimizing their risks. Unfortunately, that whole process, that whole system was abandoned under IMF pressure last year. And the result is that the farmers had no protection and the provinces stopped buying crops, especially wheat.
One quick thing, Pakistan and United States are expected to hold formal talks on tariff issues next week in Washington. So if it is settled, do you think there will be some sort of relief to Pakistani exports to the United States, and Pakistan will be able to import some of the things on very reasonable rates from United States?
Well, if Pakistan decides to go in for relief to the US imports, it will only be balancing our trading relationships, because Pakistan has had a free trade agreement with China since 2016. And do you know what is the ratio between Pakistani exports to China and Chinese exports to Pakistan?
Huge imbalance.
8-1. And
Exactly.
what is the ratio between Pakistan and the USA? We export 5, import 2. So the US market is a surplus market for Pakistan, and Pakistan clearly has a very strong interest in promoting that relationship. So we should move towards a free trade agreement with the US on imports from US, and hope that the US removes this additional levy which they have. I think they will continue with the basic 10%, which is fine, but anything above that should be waived, and Pakistan should open up its market with zero duties on American exports to Pakistan, like Chinese exports to Pakistan.
Sure. Thank you so much. We had with us Dr. Hafiz Pasha, former finance advisor, Government of Pakistan, and a very noted global economist. Dear viewers, till our next program, goodbye and Khuda Hafiz.